Good evening, everyone. I'm Alessandro Belluzzo, managing partner in the London office, here with my colleagues um, Giacomo, Martin, Kieran, and Silvia. Today we are going to comment on the budget that I suppose everyone had the chance to see and watch on TV some reactions. And I don't know if you had the time to go through our guide that we published this afternoon, but I thought that it would be important to share some information from the guide that you can see on the background. Today I'll act as a moderator, so I will give you a couple of first insights, what we think about the budget has taken us to as far as today and what we see for the future. And then I'll leave the floor to my colleagues. Today we will speak about the tax personal side with Giacomo, who is a CTA qualified person. Then we go through some of the legal background with Martin Lewis from Belluzzo Lewis Smith, and Kieran, they will speak about more on the legal side and the positive or negative intakes that we can see from the budget. And finally, we're going to close with Silvia on the corporate tax side and the news on the budget. Overall, as we have commented here, we think the budget hasn't done much, hasn't been much as we were all professional expecting to be a bit more bold on many things. Basically, they just changed a few things, and they just decided to make some further changes down the line. So we're going to see that some of the changes will not be actually, for some we'll have to wait until 29, 30 to kick in. So it's quite of a different kind of approach that we see in the past. I think they try to find a way to stabilize the country and give some assurance to the market, whilst making less possible changes compared to what they've done last year for sure, and then compared to other budget in the past. So overall, the impact on the budget is written in our guides quite clear. The economy, they expect a growth of 1.5% this year, and then it will be forecast for the next year. The inflation will go down to 2.5 next year. They expect it to be around 2 in 2027, and borrowing level and debt cuts. The debt will be also on the same trajectory. Of course, what we think about the small changes that appear to be in the budget, that they haven't changed much overall on the bulk figures, but there are so many small changes that they can affect everyone's life. So one of the consequences of this budget, we think, is that is affecting everyone, and that's something that we need also to consider for the future. So for next year, tax return, when you're going to comply with your tax return, you need to be very, very aware of these small but important changes that they can have in your overall taxation. Whilst on the international elements, that there's been so many surprises last year, we haven't seen much at all, nor on the inheritance tax side. So overall, for us, is a budget that hasn't changed much for our clients' base, and we don't think either that is going to attract many other to come to the UK, because we were expecting some kind of new as well legislation to try to attract back some individuals or investments. Overall, we haven't seen that, and so the rules remains pretty much the same. So without further ado, I'd like to leave the floor to Giacomo now to talk about the personal tax consequences on the budget. And everything that we discussed today is on our guide, so feel free to go through that in the meantime, that if you received it. But I'll leave the floor to Giacomo if you want to share something else, Giacomo, as well. I'm not sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Alessandro. So I'm Giacomo Francioni, Chartered Tax Advisor, assisting private clients, private and corporate clients at Belluzzo, London. And today I'm gonna comment briefly the budget 2025 introduced yesterday by the Chancellor with a view on the personal taxes. So as anticipated by Alessandro, the Chancellor decided to freeze the threshold for income tax and national insurance for 3 more years, extending these thresholds up to 2031. I'm not reading loud the figures because you know them. Of course, not acting means that it's through the fiscal drag. It means that possibly more person will come up paying higher rate of taxes, and because of inflation, it's there is going to be anyway, and of course, an increase of revenue for the government. And another news that has been introduced, probably minor, is the removal of the Class 2 voluntary national insurance contribution for individual resident abroad. This is basically for the requirement has been increased to 10 years of residence to actually access the state pension and in general the access to pension. So instead of a news, an important one has been the increase of taxation of passive income. So and it has been introduced an increase of from April 2026 of 2% for the ordinary, basic, and upper rates of dividend income, and no changes on the additional rate. And from 2027, there is going to be an increase also on the property, taxation of the rental income, going to 22%, and to 42% for higher rate and 47% for the additional rate. At the same time, there is going to be from 2027 April an increase of 2% for the taxation of saving income. The Chancellor also introduced a change in how the access, the cash ISA can be accessed to. So it is now capped from 2027 to 12,000, with the remaining 8,000 supposed to be used through stock and shares ISA. It is also confirmed from April 2026 the change of the regime for the carried interest, that it will be basically aligned with the treatment of trading profits, with the taxation of income tax up to 45% and Class 4 national insurance. With reference to the pension, it has been introduced from April 2029 a 2,000 cap on the amount that the individuals can contribute to the pension funds through salary sacrifice that is not subject to national insurance contribution. This is an important change, of course, and we suggest to consider possibly a review of the amount contributed to before that date. So a discussion with the various employers and an overall review of the current pension and retirement plans of our clients. It is also confirmed that from 2027, the pension, the unused pension will be within the net of the inheritance tax. It has been introduced also the emission tax, so a surcharge on the council tax for high-value properties from 2028. So basically, properties with market value of more than 1 million will be subject to an annual tax of 2,500, increased to 7,500 for properties of value above 5 millions. This is, of course, or not of course, but it will be levied on the property owners and not the occupiers or tenants. So with the reference to capital gain tax, there is a reduction of the relief on the capital gain tax on the sale of shares through employee ownership trusts. So if the relief is now 100%, it will be reduced to 50%. It is also confirmed the change from 2026 of the capital gain tax rate for both business asset disposal relief and investor relief that will be increased to 18%. It is also confirmed the change of the application of the agricultural property relief and business reliefs from 2026. So there will be a 1 million allowance, and above this threshold, the relief will only be 50%. So the news that has been introduced with this budget is that the 1 million allowance of an individual, if not used at death, can be transferred to the surviving spouse, with a couple having effectively a 2 million allowance to be used. It has been introduced an anti-avoidance rule for the temporary non-resident individuals, basically considering also the post-departure profits as subject to tax if the person returned to the UK within the 5 years time frame provided by law.
Thank you, Giacomo. So, brief comment my side before leaving the floor to Martin, I suppose. So nothing like major to report, but a few things, and the direction, the trajectory is clearly there. They are taxing more and more the not working income, if I may say. So everything that is savings in regard to savings, everything is regard to wealth, and they are trying to overall trying to keep the same taxation level for the working people, but in de facto, because of the many changes down the road, we will have not a clear picture until we don't see the future budgets, because that's very important to bear in mind. They can change next year, the provision of the budget. So simply, this is a budget to say, this is what we think, this is what will happen, but we're not sure about the direction that we're going to take next. But the trajectory is clear that they want to tax wealthy individuals, and they want to tax what is not active income in terms of working income. And that's probably the message that we'd like to give away today on this part. So Martin, I'll leave it to you now, the floor, to comment more on the legal side, please. Thank you.
Yes, Martin Lewis, company commercial solicitor here at Belluzzo Lewis Smith. And as a company commercial solicitor, I don't advise on tax. And I was anticipating today that the legal change that we might be seeing is the treatment of limited liability partners as employees. And that was one of the kites that was flown in the build-up to the budget. But in the event that has not happened. And so there are no substantial changes in company law in the pipeline until next year, when there are some transparency changes on listed and large company accounts. Now, this is a budget with a lot of detail in it, and I think it will take time for people to assess what the true impact of it is, because, as Alessandro says, it is very detailed and very diverse. And I've noticed that a Confederation of British Industry survey published in the last hour indicates that 80% of their director members regard this budget negatively now that they're beginning to understand it. And that compares with 67% for the 2024 budget. So what I'm going to comment briefly on this afternoon are two things that interest my clients about the budget. The first is business rates, which are obviously an important overhead cost affecting businesses, and which in recent years and since COVID have been difficult to model and predict for budget purposes, because they've been subject to exceptions and reliefs, which are renewed on an annual basis. Now, at last year's budget, they indicated that they would bring stability and predictability to the situation by changing the way that it is assessed and making it predictable and consistent. And this involves moving away from a single standard rate to a tiered approach. And the distinction is between small businesses, a standard rate, and a high value rate. All business premises have a rateable value. And from April next year, there will be a valuation exercise done by the Valuation Office Agency, which will be an AI-assisted desktop exercise. And I anticipate that you ought to keep an eye on what those valuations show in due course, because there may be opportunities to appeal and to adjust the value to a proper value. Overriding political purpose is to ameliorate and mitigate some of the stress that the retail hospitality and leisure sector have been subjected to with the increase in national insurance in the last budget, and also the national minimum wage. And the way that they're doing this is by making adjustments within the bubble of business generally, so that the high value multiplier for large businesses with a rateable value of over $500,000 will be used to subsidize the small businesses. And the small businesses are those with a rateable value of up to £50,000. And the standard rate will be from, £51,000 to £499,999. Now, they're not totally predictable what these rates will be, because the higher multiplier, the high value multiplier, is subject to a cap of 20 pence in the pound. And that's a cap. And so there is a certain amount of discretion. And we don't know where that discretion will lie until the government publishes figures after the revaluation is done next year. For small businesses, the reduction, the high value multiplier is 10 pence in the pound, And the reduction for small businesses and for retail, hospitality and leisure businesses is 20 pence. And as I say, there is a discretion in there. So there is much to wait for and see. And nobody can give figures about what those costs will be in future for those planning and budgeting in their businesses. But we will know in the first half of next year. And I look forward to speaking to my clients and others about what the actual numbers will be when we have further detail. The other thing that I wanted to touch upon, because it affects my clients, is UK mansion tax. This is a tax which the Chancellor said would never be introduced, but is red meat for a particular sentiment within the governing party, and there we have it. The details, again, are not particularly known apart from thresholds, and the part that we're interested in is how they will deal with ownership structures, whether partnerships, overseas companies, investment companies, and similar. What makes me anxious about the mansion tax, although it only affects probably just over 1% of properties, and those essentially situated in London and the South East, is that it represents the first step in an instinct to abolish freehold ownership of property, which is an important principle of the English political settlement, so that effectively we all become leaseholders of the state. And so I think there's the seeds of what may be an indication of a political direction for the future. It's also an indication that there is the possibility of the government in the same way making arbitrary calls upon bank accounts, savings accounts and all the rest of it, when all of these things are controlled centrally and electronically, and we have disposed of money completely. Anyway, so those are just the two things that interest my clients and which I wanted to touch upon.
Thank you, Martin.
And the mansion tax, I think, is dealt with on page 19 of the Bulutso briefing note.
Thank you very much, Martin. I'll now leave the floor to Kieran. That, of course, will comment as well on the legal side of the implication of the budget, and I might also step in for the part that we discussed together yesterday. So, Kieran, it's up to you now. Thank you.
Hi there. So, Kieran Farrell, I'm Deputy Head of Dispute Resolution at Bulutso Lewis Smith. I've been asked to talk about employment and also about immigration. There's not much on immigration at all, so I'll touch on it very, very briefly, which is that the government's launched a consultation on a new method of earned settlement for legal migrants. Not much is known at the moment, and it doesn't seem to be anything that's going to be affecting the majority of our clients, but that's something to think about in the future. On employment, there's a few things of interest, the first of which is minimum wage and the changes that we've seen there. And so there's a 4.1% increase to minimum wage for over 21s starting in April 2026, and an 8.5% increase for those aged 18 to 20, again starting in April 2026. These increases come on the back of recent increases of 6.7% and 16.3% respectively last year on the national minimum wage. And so for most employers, this won't be too much of a concern, but for those operating in the service industry and any type of gig economy situations, they may take particular interest with the rate of increases. Equally, there's further powers for the Fair Work Agency regarding the enforcement of any breaches of national minimum wage legislation. And we don't have huge details on that as of yet. But one of the key points that will become relevant as things develop is that those expansions of powers will also include the ability to target individuals in leadership roles within businesses. And so not just looking at the corporate entity itself, but also those responsible for the management and direction of companies. The other point that's particularly relevant on employment is salary sacrifice, as Giacomo has already commented. And I see that there's an opportunity to some extent for employers to have some benefit from this as well. Anyone who's going through a situation of collective redundancy or any redundancies within their business will be able to use the next 3 years during which the current scheme still operates as an incentive for any employees that are nearing retirement age to have payments by way of compensation paid directly into their pensions and allow them to benefit from avoiding the £2,000 national insurance cap that will come in 2029. So food for thought on that front. I haven't explicitly been told to talk about it, but I'm sure Alessandro will comment as well, that there's a few points to mention regarding litigation generally.
Yeah.
And a lot of this is sort of up in the air at the moment and is largely going to be dependent on the finance bill, which is expected to be fleshed out a bit more next year. But we can expect broadly an increase in funding and an increase in powers to enforcement agents regarding essentially all elements of tax. So corporate gains, corporate tax, and inheritance tax.
So that's very important, Kieran, and I want to comment on that, being working with you on the tax litigation department, Belluzzo, Lewis Smith. As you know, we are fully qualified lawyers and able, as a barrister as well, to handle the so-called HMRC's inquiries. And we see an increase of HMRC inquiries in the last decades, but most of all in the last year, probably even more than the last decade. So, and this is what we are most concerned about, because there is a piece of legislation that said the offshore anti-avoidance will be simplify. We don't know how. They want to simplify the system. That means they want to look more on that system and the fact that, as you can see, the scrutiny and the exchange of information appears to be quite important. The HMRC powers are now very, very much similar to what we used to have in Europe and in Italy specifically. They can go further, even to freeze assets now within the UK that they didn't have the power before to do that. So it's important that you prepare for a pre-litigation protocol and make sure that you do things thoroughly, which is, first of all, anything that you do with regards to even completing your tax return, is that you do it through a professional help, because this will protect you in event of any litigation. You have a written advice, and whether there will be a scrutiny, you have documents that you can show in case of litigation to avoid any penalty or any lengthy process that will cost more than anything else to manage, because the approach seems to be in the past 12 months, we're going to send you a letter, we think there's something wrong, and we try to see what is wrong. Or you have moved residency from the UK back to Europe or whatever, show us that you are really resident there. So there's much more scrutiny going on. And it's important that when you face litigation, whether it's civil or crime or fiscal one, is that you have a plan in mind, and it's important that you take this from the beginning. So this is what we want to see, and I want to say today with Kieran and the team, that although there are no major changes in that regards, we see that, again, the trajectory is there will be an increase, and was also said by the Chancellor yesterday, the tackle of anti-avoidance scheme and whatever, but it's not just the scheme, is we think the attitude that they will try to see as much as possible through the lines, and especially with complex structure, they will certainly look into it to find something to tax more than before. So without further ado, I'll now leave the floor to Silvia to comment on the corporate side. Thank you very much.
So my name is Silvia Bocchetti, and I'm responsible for corporate business compliance and financial reporting. So I will deliver a short presentation today, thinking or highlighting the main changes to tax for businesses as delivered yesterday by the Chancellor. I thought it a good idea to start with, if I manage to move on, with a little bit of context, thinking that having a kind of context can give us the same starting point and possibly a bit of wider view of what's going on. So I decided to start with the 2024 roadmap to corporate tax released by the government last year, which is a good starting point because they set a capping main rate of 25%. So they commit to not changing the tax rate of 25% and to, in combination, keeping the full expensing and annual investment allowance of 1 million. Well, the two go well together, given that corporate taxes hit businesses and the after-tax return on investment, of course. And on the other side, the full expenses would just, try to boost the growth, economic growth for the country. So these have happened if we look at the timeline, given that the next changes that have hit the businesses, as anticipated by Kieran and Giacomo earlier, are mostly national insurance, with the reducing of the threshold since April 25, the increasing of the the national insurance rate to 15%, and this in addition to the increasing of the national living wage. So all of these have, squeezed the profit margins for the businesses. So I think they have already been a little bit bruised by previous measures. So going on with the context, there have been many elemental pressures for the government, one of which has been the inflation. With the inflation has been connected with the higher interest on borrowing costs for the government, not helping with the budget, and with the reducing of the real wages for people. So these would have impacted the revenues. On the same side, the OBR has reviewed the productivity forecast for the country from 1% to 1.5%, and this has helped a little bit to, initially the budget was meant to cover a fiscal hole, and after the review, actually the net tax of 26 billion raised helped to cover or to create a headroom or fiscal buffer for the government. The fiscal rules are set by the government to stay there and still keep pressure on the decisions from the Chancellor. However, if we move to what we have today from the budget of yesterday, the table is quite rich, but I'd like just to simplify with the first three lines that relate to the national living wage and the national minimum wage increase that will impact the businesses in terms of labor cost, because the hourly rate has been increased, and on the side of the national insurance contribution, which clearly will grow as well. This will bring in on the right side, of the table, some just possible actions for the businesses. And I thought it good that for sure contracts and other related documents should be reviewed to ensure compliance with the new levels set by the government. And Kieran from legal team can assist. Also, additionally, the national insurance thresholds have been frozen. So that's the fiscal drag Giacomo was anticipating earlier, and that will create more revenues, but at the same time, for the employer, there will be an increase in costs, squeezing profit margins. And additionally, already anticipated, the 2000 capped, not applicable national insurance to pension contributions by salary sacrifice. So all these will have the effect of increasing, by fact, the employer national contributions. So I think when the employer, the businesses will sit and discuss any pay rise, they would want to consider what is the impact of these measures to the cost. In green, I have highlighted instead the changes to the capital allowance regime. Here we have a new first-year allowance of 40%. The businesses will not lose the 100% full expensing, which is already enacted, and the 40% will just expand the applicability to unincorporated businesses. So it's still good to boost, the investment decisions for businesses. There has been also a reduction into the second line to 14% of the writing down allowance. The best thing businesses can do here is that of prioritizing, of course, using the full expensing 100%, the annual investment allowance of 1 million, and the 40% where applicable, before, of course, recurring to the 14% of write-down allowance. Another highlighting change would be that of the e-invoicing system, which has been introduced starting from 2029. Well, this is going to be a new format, a new IT format, which we still don't know exactly in details. So we will look forward for more information by HMRC. But for sure, this will, business who can do is to keep track of any details which HMRC would publish and adapt IT systems and contracts, whatever is required to ensure full compliance with the new e-invoicing. One note I left is that regarding the pension contribution, the salary sacrifice, where they say that the employer will need to apply national insurance after over the 2000 threshold. In that case, a potential difficulty would be that currently there is no inclusion of national insurance contribution from the salary sacrifice in the payroll system. So it will be interesting to see how the employer should account for the national insurance. And so maybe softwares will be updated, although we need to keep an eye on that. What I will do is now is just to quickly give maybe useful a checklist of possible actions following the budget. So business could consider forecasting of cash flow for the next 3-5 years following the changes which have been seen right now. Possibly reassess the margins to see how these have been impacted and try to put in place suitable strategies. Next to that, we've seen also changes to the salary sacrifice. So maybe, as we said earlier, before arranging new wages increase, the employer should be aware of the impact of the higher national insurance contributions, along with the increase of national minimum wages and national living wages, which impact the cost and margins for the businesses. And finally, as I said earlier, a review of the technical requirements in due time for e-invoicing by 2029 to be ready. And that's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Silvia. So again, overall, minor but many changes, and it's important that we see, I think, down the line a shift from what was a simple system to a more complex one, and the making tax digital, the digitalization will require not just investment but also time. So it's important that we take time to consider the impact on the organizations, from small business to big businesses, doesn't matter, because maybe before that was a bit more in the back of our mind, easy to manage a business in the UK. It will become less and less easy, and you need to be aware of these changes and the, of course, impact they can have on that side as well. So normally we don't take questions over this, but if you want to write something, chat stuff, of course, but the best way is for us probably take emails through you guys, because we all know the only clients have been invited here, so we all know each other, and it would be easier to have a chat. But as Martin suggests, it will be also, I believe, important that there's no rush. It's important that we analyze things time to time, and in January to discuss and sit down, especially for next year changes. We don't see many, so the impact will be more in 2027, 2028, 2029. So maybe it's better to think about what has already changed from last year, digest and understand what has already changed from last year, and see what can be done for the future, with the very important point that unfortunately we need to keep in mind that tax went up, but also compliance cost went up, and complex structure will require maintenance and attention because of the scrutiny from HMRC. So the simpler, the better, probably, for the future. And I suggest that our approach is always to look from the tax, the legal, the accounting side. So overall, to make sure that we have a clear understanding of how to tackle the many changes, because it's clear that UK went through many changes since Brexit, COVID, the impact and stuff, and we see many to happen. And the only concern that we see here in this budget is that it doesn't change much. So overall, when there will be any change, because we need changes to make probably a better situation for the economic of the stabilization of the country, but also to increase investment from abroad and get more people as well interested to come back to the UK. At the moment, we see lots of people coming from countries that are not Europeans. So we see a lot of Americans, a lot of Asians, less European coming along. So many are going, as you know, but many are going because they don't see a stable country, they don't see a stable plan. And this budget didn't help on that side. So we hope that in the next month, they will have a better understanding of what they believe the future should be for the UK. Even though we see many changes happening next year, we believe that it's important to know what the future will reserve to us and to our clients. So thank you very much for your time. We stay within 45 minutes.
Alessandro,
sure.
If I can bring a piece of positive news just in for everybody to finish on a positive note, the government has reversed its flagship day one protections in its employment rights bill, which means there will be a 6-month probation period instead before all the employment rights operate. So that's a positive we can take from today.
Thank you, Martin. Anyone that wants to comment and finish, or shall we? Thank you. Thank you very much for everyone. Thank you. Thank you for your time.